Hi, if you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how, certainly in my view, social media has become, has really been absorbed into the intelligence network of Western governments, and it's perceived as a way of identifying down to the individual, Billy Bob over and so on. So identifying those who are the least persuaded about the benefits of the globalization project. So whereas education institutions or where are also used, social media in particular. If somebody said, "Well, I don't think mass migration is a good idea," then effectively you've already arrived on a watch list, Western government, because the globalist cabal controls all Western governments now, and the greatest crime you can commit isn't committing murder or robbery or stealing the chocolate bar in the store or something. The biggest crime you can commit now is not being on board with the globalist project. Now, the globalist project has various subsets, so it's climate change, it's mass migration, it's worship of transgenderism, it's these sorts of things, LGBT. So, and these are all designed to dismember and demoralize Western society. So all of them do. So if you're opposed to or question any of those central planks of the globalization project to overturn Western society, if you've got any questions or doubts or don't like or disagree with, then you're effectively already, and you post this on social media, you are now an enemy of the people. And it's a form of what I would call neo-treason. So you are treasonous by disagreeing with it or questioning it even. Now, I'll go back to days of when the Soviet Revolution or the Communist Revolution in Soviet Russia in 1917, and also when the Soviet armies rocked on into Eastern Europe at the end of World War II. They ostensibly were going to let these countries, such as Hungary and Poland and so on, they were going to let these countries decide their own government. That was part of the deal that the Soviets cut with the Americans and the British at the end of the war. But in reality, they got in there with their agitators and their vote counters to make sure that communist governments were elected, and then those governments in turn did away with any form of democratic representation that we would understand today. So this was very much a thing. When the totalitarians require power, they just rig the elections to get it, which they did in Eastern Europe and well, not so much in 45 because that was the end of the war, but certainly 1946 through 1948 in particular was what the Russians were doing. Now, one of the things when the communists took over and when the communists arrived and the Russian armies arrived was they would encourage people to say, well, look, this is your government, this is your country, this is your society. You have a right to speak. You have a right to have your say. So why don't we have town hall meeting? We'll have town hall meetings and you can get up and say what sort of government you'd like, who you'd like to represent you, the sort of policies and the sort of laws and sort of, this is you. Come on, hey, come to the town hall meeting and let's talk about it. Let's share the ideas. Now, this was, in fact, a very cynical ploy. The Soviets, the communists, had no intention of listening to anybody. Their only purpose was to flush out activists or people that may not be completely on board with the communist program, people who may have undue influence. Others would follow, any natural leaders, anybody who was speaking serious common sense, anybody who may be even the slightest threat to the communist order. Now, I've known people who were, teenagers or young adults in Eastern Europe, places like Hungary and so on, Czech Republic and so on, when, during the Nazi times, but also during the Soviet times. The communist times, and it's interesting listening to including Jews, by the way. Now here's some, for example, a Hungarian Jew, and very Jewish, very Jewish name, all this sort of thing, and talking to him, and he was like 15 or 16 years old when the Russian communists arrived in Hungary. Again, a Jewish guy, okay, and he far prefers the Nazis than the Soviets or the Russian communists. Now that's an interesting sort of thought there. So, and I'll come back to that later. But these people remember the days when the Russians came, and they'd have these town hall meetings, and the people that were deemed by the Soviet commissars, the political commissars, the power control freaks of the day, they would make note of who got up and spoke, and see how much following they had, whether, again, the natural leaders, the common sense, anybody who would be deemed as directly or indirectly as a threat to communist power. And these people mysteriously disappeared, or mysteriously were accused of these crimes, different sorts of crimes, stealing from the people, and enemy of the people, and bourgeois oppressor, and eerily similar to some of the accusations that are made today against people that don't agree with globalization in the way. I mean, it's just I'm sure it's coincidence, but there you go. So one of the tragedies of the human condition, in my view, is that we do not learn from the past, and we continue to make the mistakes of the past. And if anything, we should stand out, amongst other things, if that sort of thing should stand out as a mistake. Whenever people want that much power that they want to arrest you and falsely accuse you of crimes just because you disagree with them, then you're in deep shit, and which is where we are today with globalization, I would argue. And it's the same then, that we, provided we crush every other opinion, every other point of view, then we will prevail. But we can't prevail, and we can't get people to follow us and believe in us until we can crush every other opinion and every other point of view and every other voice. I mean, how fucked up is your program if that's the only way you can get it across the line? I mean, seriously. So anyway, this is what the Soviets did. And I think, and if you look at the likes of, the Twitters, or certainly before Mr. Musk took it over, if you look at the likes of the Twitters and indeed other social media platforms, their particular role is to crush alternative points. Anything that questions or brings into to question the globalist project, and it has some sort of a popular following, those things are routinely cancelled on some very spurious and inventive grounds, and vague references to didn't meet our policy guidelines, that sort of stuff. And I think that's the beginning of the end for any civilization. It's already in a downward spiral, and like the Soviet Union that fell to pieces, its death rattles were already beginning. I mean, before the globalization project is fully taken over, it's already in the beginning of its death rattles, because if you're going to create something that is going to endure in any way, it must have the buy-in of the people, and this doesn't have the buy-in. It therefore is not legitimate in terms of that buy-in. It is, in a democracy and in an open society, it is the buy-in that creates the legitimacy, not some fucking tyrant dictating it'll be this way and that way. That isn't how it works. Or the benefits of the tyrannical regime must be shared, obviously and substantially, amongst the vast majority. So now you can have, I've done a vast amount of business traveling and still do some, but there have been a few places that I've done business in which are clearly quite tyrannical, at least from a political point of view. You have economic freedom of association, but you do not have political freedom of association. Far from it, you do not have political freedom of association. So, but this one place I'm thinking of, it's delivered much higher standards of living for the citizenry. The citizenry have done very well out of it. It's gone from being a swampy backwater into being quite a modern state. And, again, because the citizens have benefited so much commercially and economically from it, and because the benefits are there, and they've been reasonably well spread. Not that there isn't an elite, there is, but they've been reasonably well spread around. So the people accept the loss of freedom, as in political freedom in this case, but they pick up they gain in almost every other sphere. And again, they have freedom of economic association. If they want to go from, one town or city or whatever to the next, they don't need special papers or anything like that. They just get in the car or get on the train and go, and this sort of thing. Which, by the way, for local citizens in many countries, you can't do. We take it for granted. When I go and visit any country like the United States or Britain, I can go anywhere. I can just hire a car and go anywhere I want, or get on the public transport, or take a plane, or fly here, go there. And just there's not many countries where you can actually do that. We take that for granted, but it's actually a liberty. That freedom of association is a liberty that not many countries permit. Anyway, coming back to the material point of this essay, is that, like the town square where the Soviets would encourage people to speak up, or offer a platform, a place and a platform where they could speak up and talk about what they want. But in fact, they were monitoring and spying and watching, and again, these and you could get a depersoning the same way you can be depersoned here in the West now. They would deperson you in the communist era, and if they wouldn't necessarily deperson you directly, although they could fine you, for example, so you couldn't pay the rent on your government apartment, and then they could evict you for not paying it, or they could make out you're indebted to the state. Well, you better behave from now on, or else. Or they could come at you indirectly and say, well, your mother's in a nursing home, and we're going to throw her out on the street, or we're going to put her in a prison because we're going to declare her as an enemy of the state if you don't play ball. And also they could manufacture these plots against the state. You're conspiring with others to overthrow the government of the people. You are an enemy of the people, and so on. Now, this is the parallels with those sorts of things, which people were arbitrarily arrested for, conspiring against the government, enemy of the people, and all this sort of thing. Bourgeois revolutionaries and the like, or counter-revolutionaries as they call them. And they could arbitrarily arrest people on allegations. Now, I want you to compare that and draw the very clear parallel between the January 6th business and what the Soviets used to arbitrarily do to arrest people, to say, oh, you're conspiring to overthrow the government. There's prison for you, buddy. And they of course, once you're accused of a political crime, you cease to have legal rights. And again, we're heading that way in the West. You're a January 6th, you're trying to overturn the government, or this overthrow the government. Therefore, you don't have legal right. We can keep you in solitary confinement and detention without charge. What happened to habeas corpus and these sorts of things? Who cares? You're committing a political crime against the people. You fucking fascist Nazi. You don't deserve legal rights. And increasingly, we're moving to this arbitrary ideological law where legal rights don't exist if you're accused of certain crimes, such as this umbrella of neo-treason that's creeping in now into the legal discourse and into Western jurisprudence everywhere. And it's specifically a device to shut people up who don't agree with the globalist or question the globalist project. And I see the whole social media landscape really is giving itself over to that. I mean, look at the people. This is again pre-Musk, but look at the people in Twitter who were in charge of who has the right to speak. Can you find any one of those who wasn't a hard-baked globalist intelligence official like Baker and those guys, but can you find anyone there who likes Western society, or thinks it's good, or thinks it should be, has any good points at all? Everybody who was fact-checking was either a foreign national, from India or Pakistan or somewhere like that, was a foreign national, or they were, gay, lesbian, Jewish people who hated Gentiles or somewhere like that, was a foreign national, or they were, gay, lesbian, Jewish people who hated Gentile society, or they were chip on shoulder, Indian chicks like Garday who were surrounded by evil fascist, Nazi, racist, misogynist, bigots, Nazi, Hitler, and this was the entire thing. You couldn't have put together a bunch of people that hated America and the West and white society more than these folks. I mean, why do you come to our white society if you hate it so much and it's so bad? And we're only here for the fucking money. We hate all you people. We just come here to take the fucking money. That's all we're here for. So it wouldn't be possible just on a random hiring basis to hire so many people who hate the West, hate America, and hate white society. So this is the architecture of the social media landscape. It's become, in my view, a device simply to get people to offer people an opportunity to out themselves as not fully being on board with the globalist project. And like the old Soviet thing of the 1940s and 50s and even earlier, the whole point of that, either, if not initially, it certainly quickly became so, a way of getting people to self-declare their position on sensitive, as the globalists would see it, sensitive ideological and politico-ideological matters. So this is where we've gone. This is where we've come to, and this is where it's well, I'm not going to say we're going there. We've arrived, for fuck's sake. This is how it is, and so people, I guess like me, are probably on some sort of watch list as being a subversive any of the people, the bourgeois counter-revolutionary. He's a fucking Nazi, and this thing that the Soviets used, or the communists, was anyone that wasn't deemed as being fully on board. And you could do something like, all you have to do is go to the library, and they left books in the library solely for this purpose as bait. That you can go and get out a book on Shakespeare, and that'd be it, because they'd say ideologically, if you want to read Shakespeare, it means you have a certain intellectual capacity, which means you're an enemy of the people, and you're a bourgeois, and you're a counter-revolutionary, and you're a fascist, and because of this you must be that. And so this is all done ideologically and arbitrarily. So if you get out a book from the library on Shakespeare, then that means you are Hitler. And so that's the process that they use legally, and then you can be arbitrarily arrested. Okay, we've already proved you're Hitler because you got out this book on by Shakespeare, and so you have to prove you're not Hitler. Yeah, motherfucker. And so this is again the process that the globalists use, eerily similar to the totalitarianism of the Soviet era, and their constant paranoid sensitivity about the finer points of power and its exercising through this ideological prism, Marxism in this case. But the globalists are doing more or less the same thing, but they're moving sort of more slowly, whereas the Bolshevik communists in Russia, they had an armed revolution and bang, they had power, and they exercised it with great brutality. Here, the globalists are moving, sort of nudging it slowly along. So this idea of arbitrarily arresting people for trying to overturn the government, or having conspiracy theories, this sort of thing, that each year and more than that, every few months, it just notches up a degree or two. It's Billy Bob is against mass migration, which means he's a racist. If he's a racist, it means he's a fascist. If he's a fascist, it means he's a Nazi, which means he's a white supremacist, which means we just have to put him into prison. I mean, look at the threat Billy Bob poses to the community. He's a Nazi. And next thing you know, Billy Bob's being marched off without so much as a clear or obvious charge on anything, and arbitrarily imprisoned, brought before an activist judge, of which every day there are more, and go, well, that's it, Billy Bob, you have to prove you're not a Nazi. Can't do it. 20 years in the fucking state penitentiary for you, motherfucker. Or we steal your house, or we fine you, or we impoverish you, or we make you unemployable, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, they can get at you, and that's where we're at. And there's hardly anyone pushing back against this, really. The onward march of this eradication of our legal rights is going apace. Scary shit. You're being a Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.